It's easy for us to throw stones at that contractor who thought that was a good idea. What would you tell that person now after having seen this unfortunate building science situation?
We're a family-oriented show here, and I can't feelings.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and pressure-treated wood foundations aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Fine Homebuilding Editorial Advisor Mike Girton.
Hi.
Fine Homebuilding Senior Editor Brian Pontalillo.
Hey, everyone.
And our producer, Andres Samaniego. Please email your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Great to see you guys this morning. Thank you for being here.
You bet.
Yeah.
So we were talking ahead of the show that it's pouring here in Connecticut and throughout much of the Northeast. I hope you all have come through the storm okay and you haven't lost your power or what have you. But if something happens during the show, power outage or whatever, you all will know what happened and we'll try and pick it up when we can. Mike, you sent me some very interesting photos last week in email showing a little project you had in your Arizona house. Can you tell me about that, please?
Yeah, so I've been replacing the bathroom fans, the old ones from the 1980s. They just made noise, as most people know. So I was putting in some nice retrofit, remodel style Panasonics, which have a pretty cool system for putting in a bracket and all that. Anyway, the hole for the fan body needed to be about an inch bigger in two directions. So I started cutting out the old fan and cutting the hole in my main bathroom, and I looked up and I saw ductwork that was just crushed. It's the fiber aluminum duct board. So it's not a very structural material, and it looks like when the fan was put in, it may not have been original to the house. The old fan might have been put in sometime in the 80s. Somebody just cut a hole, figuring that they put the fan in, and there was some ductwork in the way, ductboard, and they just pushed the ductboard up. So I'd been wondering for the past year why there was some mad air coming in from different places, like around the vanity whenever the heat pump would go on. And what it seems is that because somebody had crushed the duct and a board had fallen off, all of the air was just flowing into this cavity up in the ceiling and then traveling down through or along the side of the vanity. So I spent a whole day repairing duct board through. I had to cut the whole ceiling out.
Because you had to reroute it, right? Because the fan housing was in the way. I'm guessing there was no way to put both in this same ceiling joist cavity, right?
Precisely. So what I did was, well, it's not a ceiling joist cavity, fortunately. It's a dropped ceiling, or not a dropped as in acoustical ceiling, but dropped as it's in a lowered ceiling. So there's a whole, essentially a chase that runs through the middle of the house that houses in the duct, the main duct plenum. And so I could just move the fan over about 8 inches and not have a problem. And then I've been patching the hole ever since and texturing the ceiling to match. But yeah, it was just amazing that somebody at some past renovation just thought that smashing the ductwork to get it out of the way was a good idea. And the energy penalty for probably the past 30 years since they put that old fan in has been something that the previous owners have had to pay for, and they didn't know any different.
So where was that duct running to? And I'm guessing there was a great sacrifice in air delivery in that space, right? Yeah.
Yep, exactly. It delivered air to two different bathrooms and one bedroom. So it truncated a substantial portion of the delivery system at the end of this main trunk line. And I'd been puzzled over it. And a year ago, or maybe 10 months ago, I think I had sent you some thermographic images showing some of the heat loss that I was noticing through the round bird blocks where they had cut the holes in the overhang. Instead of a soffit here, they just have some solid blocking between the rafters. The rafters cantilever over and they're exposed. So there are these little round vents that are cut into the horizontal rafter blocking, and you could see that we're getting hot when the heating was going. So I knew something was going on, but I didn't know where or what. So, in one way, this was an unfortunate situation for the previous owners, and for me discovering it at the last minute when I planned this to be a 45-minute swap out of the bath fan. But in a good way, I discovered what I knew somewhere there was a duct problem. And so now it's repaired and looking forward to getting delivered air where it belongs.
It's easy for us to throw stones at that contractor who thought that was a good idea. And I know they didn't think it was a good idea. They were just trying to collect a check. What would you tell that person now after having seen this unfortunate building science situation?
We're a family-oriented show here, and I can't hurt feelings. I have no sympathy for contractors who cut corners like that. I mean, there are corners you can cut, but they're mostly in decisions of materials. Maybe going with a lower grade material, or saying, "Oops, I made a mistake. I'm going to have to patch your ceiling, and it's not going to look perfect." But to just go and blow out the whole end of the duct board and leaving it wide open is just the worst part. And you might have noticed in the photographs was that mice, or actually their pack rats, got up into that ceiling at one point. So the ductwork was full of rat droppings. So I vacuumed all those out. So now we've got clean air too.
Maybe you're glad that wasn't delivering the air the way it was supposed to, right?
Exactly.
What do you think about this, Brian?
Well, it makes me think of well, first of all, I mean, wouldn't even call that cutting corners, Mike. I mean, except that maybe literally they were cutting the corner of the ductwork,
Exactly.
but that's not even cutting corners. That's actually like
Breaking
just
stuff, let's call it that. Yeah.
yeah, let's call it breaking stuff, or like just deciding that maybe I was hired, or I decided I was putting a bath fan in here, and that's my job, and kind of screw the rest of this situation. So and I would, and just to, I mean, cutting corners is the idea of that Kevin Ireton wrote about in Fine Homebuilding maybe last year or so, in a Building Matters piece about when is what's enough, or when is good enough okay. Like,
Hmm.
cutting corners on a material choice. I mean, again, cutting corners has a bad connotation to me. And, I think like a material choice, and then, but still using that material well and building a high quality house, to me isn't cutting a corner. It's making a necessary decision in a building project. This just seems hacky, and like the person should have their business license revoked. um, I will mention, Patrick called it a building science blunder. We do have an article coming up, and I think it's going to be a two-part article. I think it's going to be in the next two issues of Fine Homebuilding, because I was kind of over ambitious with the amount of content that I developed for it. But we have an article coming up on building science mistakes to avoid, and I just reached out to a whole number of people who sort of people who are right now kind of involved in teaching building science principles, and said, what are the most common mistakes that are made, and how do we avoid them. And we have this great collection of really simple things, from like not having adequate kitchen or bath ventilation, to running ducts in unconditioned spaces, just these really common things that are done in our homes that are almost considered acceptable until you know better. And I'm glad to see building science coming almost synonymous with best practices, in the way that, like, builders are learning that a true best practice has to be informed by building science, be in direct, kind of relationship with it. So yeah, I'm glad you fixed that situation.
It's alarming how often that happens, I am sure. And yeah, especially bath fans, you know.
Yeah.
That person cut a hole and was very shocked to find that ductwork there, I can tell you. And they're just like, what do I do now? And they said, oh, I know.
It's still so surprising to me. I was just speaking of that building science article. One of the pieces that I wrote for it was about, or is about, inadequate kitchen and bath ventilation, and I was making sure that my code references were correct. And the at least up to the 2021 code, you're still allowed to have no exhaust ventilation in a bathroom if you have a window. If you have I think it's a 3 square foot window in your bathroom, and that just seems so ludicrous to me, because we've all seen, like, I mean, I have a good friend who had just put an addition on his house, a master bedroom, bathroom, or owner's suite kind of addition on his house maybe 2 years ago. And I don't know whether he didn't ask me to investigate it. I just happened to catch it walking down the hallway. I don't know whether the bath fan that is in there is undersized or misplaced, or if it's not exhausting properly or not running properly. But the whole ceiling paint is peeling. And how
Mm.
often do you see interior paint peeling? Not that often. Like, exterior paint peels, interior paint tends, you have to have a serious problem for interior paint to peel. And I think, like, it just seems crazy to me that you would not have the ability to clear all that excess moisture from a bathroom fast.
Who the
I mean, I
heck
think the
wants to
ocean,
open their window in the winter or the dead of summer? That makes no
yeah,
sense whatsoever.
and it might not work.
It probably
Right? It
won't.
might not
Yeah.
work if the pressure differential between inside and outside is not in your favor.
Well, and
So,
around here, it
um,
could be 90% humidity in the summertime, and you're trying to
exactly.
vent your. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that a bath fan, and maybe even more so, a timer or delayed off switch should just be best practice and necessary, required.
No, all of this seems so matter of fact to us. You need to have ventilation in a bathroom or even in a kitchen, and that the codes have taken so long to catch up. And as we're discussing this, I'm thinking, but all of this has happened in the last, 35, 40 years, which is a short period of time in building. And there's so much of a legacy of thought amongst builders that, in the 30s, 40s, 50s, this wasn't even a consideration because the houses were so leaky you didn't need bathroom ventilation because it was naturally ventilated at a pretty rapid
Yeah.
rate. And it's only been as we've made buildings tighter, either by default or by code, that they've now we need to have the ventilation. So I think builders are taking a long time to catch up, and even now, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Andres, you went down to your basement this morning, and I'm sure, like a lot of other folks in the Nutmeg State, you found water. Was it in a closet? What's going on? Are you alarmed by this
Yeah,
development?
I did find some water in the closet. This was from a couple of weeks ago. I haven't gone into the closet in a few days, and I happened to go these past weekend, and I saw some water. So I'm like, I didn't see it where it's coming from, but I know it's coming from the entrance because I do have a small step. It could be also the fact that I put a floodlight I installed, so it could be penetrated from there. So now that it's raining today, I'm actually gonna be able to trace it.
Yeah, and we have some wind, which sometimes affects how things leak.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think you got ideal conditions for a leak and tracking one
Yeah,
down.
I have my fair share experience of tracking a lot of leaks with the building experience I had.
Well, you're welcome to borrow my IR camera. Oftentimes, you can find leaks after the fact because as the surfaces dry that have gotten wet, they are colder than the surrounding area, so you can pinpoint how water is moved, which is kind of a
Yeah,
cool thing. Well, I hope you get to the bottom of that. Do you have a favorite Pookie to put in this hole when you find it?
I think I'll use that brand, that flexible one. I forget the brand's name. We saw it at IBS. Remember they were stretching it. I forgot the brand
Uh,
name.
Was that Big
Big
Stretch?
stretch, big stretch, right?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, yeah,
Sashco
that's a great
sealants.
seal. That's a great sealant. That company is good too, right, Mike?
Yeah, yeah, they make
Yeah.
several good products. Yeah.
I put a few floodlights around my house, and I think I'm gonna start sealing all of those. One of them is like 2 stories high, so That should be fun.
Gets Do it someday when there's someone around is my advice to hold the bottom ladder and what have you.
Definitely. I did install a bathroom fan as well. It was getting a lot of moisture inside there. So all the ceiling, it's plaster. You can start to see, some mold coming in. I'm like, this bathroom definitely needs a fan. So I had to like run one through it, and now I have to air seal that.
Did you go with the Panasonic like Mike
No,
did?
actually, I bought one from Amazon, one that has like lights and stuff. It's kind of flashy.
Cool. Well, I put up some cove lighting in my office/workshop, and I'm real happy with it. I will keep it brief, but what I did is bought some LED strip light from Amazon, and I believe it's around 3000 K color temperature, which is a warm light. I zip tied it to a piece of half-inch steel black pipe, so I could angle it to get a good look on the ceiling. And the cove itself is made from resawn 2x12s that I had left over actually from building the shelf behind me. So that was my first time resawing dimensional lumber. And I can tell you it is pretty awesome to have access to a fine wood shop like the fine woodworking folks have. And that makes it pretty easy with dust collection and a good bandsaw. And I'm real happy with how it turned out. But took a long
It
time. There
looks
was a
great.
couple iterations. Thanks.
How did when you resawed the Doug fir? Did what was the final dimension roughly that you got out of a good wood that you got out of the 2x12?
I was shooting for 3/4 mic, but it ends up being about 5/8, I think, with the kerf and a little blade drift. Yeah, and it was surprisingly uniform. That's something that surprised me. If you have a good bandsaw with a sharp blade, it cuts pretty straight. I'll put some photos up for folks who are interested. I'm powering it with a driver located up in the cavity where the cove and horizontal and vertical pieces meet. It's powered by line voltage up to there, and then I used some speaker wire. Actually, it's lamp cord. I tried to buy speaker wire from Amazon or what they suggested as wire for LED lights, and it was the cheapest speaker wire you could possibly imagine. So don't make that mistake. Buy some like 16 or 18 gauge lamp cord at the home center and use that instead. It's far tougher and easier to work with. The copper strands and the speaker wire were so fine, I didn't trust any connection because it was just too lame.
I'm we have another article coming up in this next issue on lighting, and it's mostly it's from a lighting designer named David Warfel, who's really a wealth of knowledge and really kind of pushes the boundaries of lighting in the way that he does. He's not beholden to like any sort of common strategies that we use, and also is sort of on the bleeding edge of products and what's available. And so the article is largely a design story, but he does have one sidebar on LED lighting and sort of the future of how we wire our lighting. And it was the first time that I had seen these remote driver terminals. Have you all seen these yet? I mean, for lack of a better thing to compare it to, imagine your electrical box with breakers in it for all your circuits. And these lighting companies or control companies are coming up with these sort of panels very much like that, where you have these sort of snap-in drivers. So you'll basically be creating lighting circuits from there within your house, which will use low voltage wiring. So that's where you'll have your step down, and then you'll be using low voltage wiring to wire your house from there, and you'll be able to use sort of these plug and play drivers that have all sorts of different qualities. They do more apparently, and I know little about this. It's the product that he used that he references in this sidebar actually isn't even quite available yet. It still says coming in 2023. So hopefully it's something that will be out soon. But these drivers have more qualities than just stepping down the voltage. They can control light temperature. They can even have like light temperature timers on them, so the light temperature adjusts throughout the day. So really, really interesting stuff, and that's where your dimmability comes into play. It all will happen at this sort of remote driver panel, which is really interesting. One of the other things, I mentioned the temperature thing. He says that what hasn't caught up yet with these LEDs having this ability to have different light temperatures. And he says that's great, except for the fact that the right light temperature depends on the time of day. Right? There's no one right light temperature for a house. And so with these remote drivers and these more sophisticated controls, you actually may be able to put your lights on this light temperature timer curve, right, that arcs with the sun and the different quality of light that's happening throughout a day. So he says that he basically saying that all this LED technology, and it's been it's moving fast probably because of the energy efficiency and energy usage of it. But now the sort of all the other kind of beneficial attributes of it are going to start to catch up. And it sounded really promising for the future of lighting.
I'm going to make another appeal. If any of you out there know someone or are somebody who installs these, we would love an installation piece, and I would love to work with you on that for Fine Homebuilding, because as Brian suggests, this stuff is still being worked out, and if you have good techniques or any techniques, we'd love to talk to you about it. It's evolving quickly, right, Brian?
I think so. And one of the things that whenever so often when I work with someone like David on a project like this, someone who works in a very specific industry, and especially industries that have a portion of it's residential. But I mean, I think he did lighting for like Carnegie Hall, so he also works. I think his work is some residential, but also it's all these other things. And so he has this view of what's available, and he has this view of what's going to make its way to residential that those of us in the residential construction world aren't going to know about till it gets here, till it arrives. So sometimes Patrick, as you know, well, Mike, as you know too, you've been doing this at Fine Homebuilding longer than Patrick, right? But sometimes we're unfortunately ahead of things at Fine Homebuilding, where it's like, we publish an article and then, about something that's new and coming. And then 10 years later, people start to hear about that thing and our article's old news.
You got to be at the crest of the wave when you deliver an article. You don't want to be too far ahead of the wave or you miss it completely.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank our listeners who wrote in both with questions and feedback on the show. This one comes from Chris in Chicago. Hey, I want to comment on your discussion about home maintenance. As someone who has tried this type of business in a previous lifetime and still gets calls from friends and family for these types of repairs, it's just not possible to make a business out of it unless you are catering to the higher income households. The average homeowner is just not willing to spend much money to have someone do these types of repairs. Most think this is $10 to $20 an hour work. The reality is you have to have a great deal of knowledge and tools, plus you have to have mostly the same overhead as any other trade. However, you can't demand anywhere near what a plumber or an electrician can charge. Keep it up, gang. You're putting out a great podcast. Well, thanks, Chris. Yeah, we've said that before, right? It's tough to make a go of it in the handyman business. You just can't charge enough money.
That's why we don't see big networks of handyman services that are, sustainable for a long period of time.
And folks have tried it, right? There's been big companies who have tried to do the kind of, I'm going to describe it as the Uber model of home repair and improvement, and that's gone nowhere. It's too hard.
I noticed that.
Go ahead, Brian.
Well, some of what we have what we talked about as it relates to that has been home maintenance, right? There's sort of the repair handyman aspect of it, then there's the home maintenance aspect of it. And I noticed that Nick Schiffer, anyone who listens to podcasts probably knows Nick from the Modern Craftsman podcast. His company has launched a sort of a maintenance division of the company. I haven't talked to him about this yet, and I actually would like to hear more from him about it. But they're a home builder, but now they've launched this maintenance division, and I think it's to do a lot of what we talk about that homes need now, things like checking in, changing filters, that kind of work. So maybe we'll get Nick on the podcast. He's experienced speaking about this kind of stuff, and maybe he can speak to it a little bit, how he's doing it in the context of a home building company.
I don't know anything about Nick's model, but my guess is these are past clients who need their homes taken care of, and they know him, and he
Right.
knows how their houses are built, and yeah,
Right.
it's a
Yeah. Smart.
logical thing. This comes from Tim in Underhill, Vermont. I know a Tim in Underhill, Vermont. Is that you, Tim? I have some feedback on the board and batten rain screen question. I've been installing vertical 1x6 green hemlock shiplap siding on my house and garage as I renovate. For horizontal furring, I use half-inch plywood ripped into 3-inch strips with beveled edges. I only really care that the top edge is beveled to push any water out to the siding, but I just set my table saw up at an angle and cut a bunch of strips so the bottom edges end up angled too. The green hemlock installed tight shrinks to create a 1/16 to 1/8 inch gap at the lap joints. These gaps are really what I rely on for ventilation and or drainage. Depending on my level of rot paranoia that day, I'll either use CDX or PT plywood. One downside of the plywood is that the edges of the strip sometimes have voids that could puddle water, but I'm trying to keep the rain screen assembly thin and there isn't an economical source for half-inch thick solid stock. Maybe I should ask the local sawmill to make me some. I think this design would work even better with board and batten as the gaps are a little bit bigger and as long as the boards are relatively narrow, like 1x8. This is all a grand experiment though. I have 3 years on my oldest re-side without issue. Here are some pictures from last fall's re-side on the north side of my house. The roof was the other DIY project last year. It's snapped together standing seam to replace the 40-year-old Galvalume. I added sheathing, overhangs, and a rodent-proof attic vent. I'd like to hear more about the rodent-proof attic vent, Tim. Beautiful building, right? I love its vernacular characteristics. It's fantastic.
Indeed.
Yeah.
What do you think about the rain screen detail? We're going to hear more about that from David in Sweden.
I think it's viable.
Seems perfect, right?
I
Yeah.
like the bevel idea. It's not going to it's not going to redirect all the water, but it's probably going to get a large proportion of any water that leaks in, and like his intention there, kind of kick it towards the back of the siding rather than running down the water resistive barrier.
And it's going to dry. I think that's the other important factor is that with the gaps between the boards, it can dry once it gets wet.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This comes from Jeff on Bainbridge Island, Washington. Hey guys, I enjoy listening to the show while working on home and rental projects with my wife and coworker of 34 years. We were very entertained to listen about the horrors of replacing crawl space flex duct while we were in a crawl space, replacing all the flex duct during a tornado alert in the Pacific Northwest. Regarding the LVP, it seems to be coming open in the Pacific Northwest in episode 606. I have a couple ideas from experience which were not mentioned. I assume the Pacific part of the Pacific Northwest means west of the Cascade Mountains, so expansion and contraction are probably not an issue. When the click lock planks are installed, if you just click lock by hand without final tapping with a block and mallet, the seam may look tight, but the locking part, which cannot be seen from above, may not have engaged fully. This can lead to separation, as shown in the photographs. The fix is to unassemble the floor and redo it. The second possibility is that there is too much deflection in either the subfloor or because a spongy underlayment was used. In this case, the micro movement in the vinyl planks as you walk on it will eventually cause the tongue to crack, the locking mechanism to fail, and then separation is shown. This happens in the traffic paths first, since that's where most of the movement back and forth on the vinyl happens. To fix this, you need to resolve the source of deflection and then redo the floor. If you don't have new planks to replace the cracked ones, the cracked tongue can be reused in a less focal area and use vinyl glue along the seam to make up for the failed tongue. Best regards, Jeff, Bainbridge Island, Washington. He says, P.S. My wife thinks your panel suffers from a common malady in the tech industry referred to as not invented here. The tendency for management to reject any idea that did not originate within the organization. You were discussing various construction techniques to raise a laundry a foot off the floor. Nobody suggested Amazon, where you'll find laundry pedestals starting at $20. There you go.
What I like the best about Jeff's feedback is that I imagine Jeff and his wife they're sitting home and the sirens go off, the alerts come on their phone, tornado warning, and they look at each other and they say, "Let's go down to the crawl space and fix flex duct. It'll be the safest thing we can do."
Keeps your mind off of the tornado that's
Right.
rambling down your lane.
It's got to be way better than just sitting down there doing nothing. That is for sure. Oh,
I
that's
guess so.
fantastic. This comes from David in Sweden. Hello again from Sweden. I just finished listening to podcast 606 and had two quick responses. First, on the board and batten siding. Vertical siding is common here, and the method is simple. Nail 1/2 inch by 2 inch dimensional strapping to all vertical studs, and then 1 by 3 dimensional strapping horizontally, often 24 inches on center. I think Brian mentioned this method, but followed up with, but that's a ton of work. It's a house. It's all a ton of work. That is the truest thing anyone has ever said to the
Yeah.
podcast. David, thank you very much. With battery saws and nailers, or even a handsaw and hammer, this work goes pretty fast, and the materials are readily available at, I would assume, every lumberyard or DIY box store. Side note, at some point, a discussion on correct fastener length could be good. If you gap your strapping, but then drive nails through the siding, strapping, and air gap layer into the sheathing, you've compromised your sheathing as a control layer. With vertical siding, one of the nice flashing details on old houses are slope boards mounted above windows and at the base of walls. These act as kick-out flashings and seem to be quite effective. At the base of the wall under this kick-out can be a single horizontal plank at the base of the siding, with the understanding that it will weather and rot quicker and will need to be replaced more often, but will protect the rest of the siding from rotting from the bottom up. About the vinyl plank flooring, I was wondering if this soft material that could be pinched by the baseboards, so when the floor contracts seasonally, it was unable to shrink evenly and found a weak joint in the middle, or is there heavy furniture on either side of the gap? Most floating floors I've installed say not to mount any heavy furniture or cabinetry on top of the floor for this reason. This doesn't help fix his current problem, could help him and others avoid future issues. Thanks for the great podcast. I always look forward to it, both for the education and the entertainment. Have a great week, David. David, thank you. I love hearing from our international listeners. That's awesome. Good suggestions there. And David, it was such a good observation about old buildings and their detailing to deal with water management that we decided to have a podcast after show on the very subject of old house details that help buildings last longer or perform better. So I think that is a fantastic show. I hope you'll stay tuned for that. What do you guys think about David's email?
Well, I'm curious what you guys think of the one point that jumped out at me, though it's not a big point, but that all of those nails that you drive sort of off stud location when you're nailing your siding to that strapping, and that the nails, if they're too long, end up puncturing into the sheathing, and then therefore you compromise
Hmm.
your sheathing as a control layer. Do you think that's a problem?
Well, I mean, that jumped out at me too, Mike, because any whether you have a rain screen detail or not, you're installing siding, you're puncturing your WRB all over it, and so that's just the way houses are built, and in most cases it's not a problem, or all of these houses that are built like that would be failing.
Mm.
We'd have rotted sheeting everywhere, and then when it comes to that layer as the air barrier, we also know that final typically final blower door testing is done when the house is complete and siding is installed, so we know that it's not compromising the air barrier either.
Mm.
So I wasn't sure if that was. I mean, certainly anything we can do to not compromise the water barrier, the air barrier is helpful. And if there are ways to put less fasteners through it, absolutely, why not go for it? But I don't know that it's a compromise that has kind of proven to be true in our existing buildings. What
Mm.
did you think?
No, I think the same thing. I think if it's something that I've heard other people get raise concerns
Yeah.
about, and I just didn't want to propagate the concern there, because I think like you that experience has shown us with lots of situations of homes that many homes we're not seeing problems with either air leakage or with water leakage due to those nails penetrating through, even if they're not in a compressed situation or where the siding's directly applied to the WRB, and or that those nails are not going directly into through the sheathing and into studs. If it's just going into the sheathing, we don't see a problem.
Hmm.
Doesn't
Yeah, and I've heard
Christine
the
Williamson
same.
have a whole website dedicated to this, or an Instagram page, building Science Fight
I
Club.
think
Yeah.
I think her, yeah, and I think one of the points that she wanted to make was about fasteners and paneled, products like zip sheathing and force field and others that that fasteners, even slightly overdriven fasteners, are all of a sudden this product is no good when that's not the reality. If your overdriven fasteners are such that they compromise the structural integrity, yeah, you got to do something about them, but you're not going to really actually harm it as a water resistant barrier or air barrier. And people have the same concerns about interior air barriers and vapor retarders on interior walls. And I've heard that comment a lot, like, what's the point of doing this? And then we're going to shoot all these drywall screws through this material. And I think, again, the blower door results have shown that that's not a concern when an interior membrane is your air barrier. And when it comes to vapor retarders, it's okay to have some holes. Holes in a vapor retarder aren't a problem.
Mm.
If it's an air barrier, they're a problem. If it's a vapor retarder, it's not. They're more, to keep, as much vapor drive from getting to a condensing surface as possible. But, a few, even a significant hole in a vapor retarder, it's not going to, it may be a problem in that one little area, but it's not like all of a sudden your vapor retarder for your house is no good.
You left me speechless there. It was pretty good conversation, I gotta say.
Summary. Yeah.
Yeah. This comes from Mickey. Hey, podcast crew. I've been listening for a year or two, and I've learned a ton. I'm ready to take on a bigger project, and I'd love your take. We have a 2002 built stucco-sided home with a basement in Colorado's Front Range between Denver and Colorado Springs. Local code calls for the foundation wall to continue 6 inches above grade, but unfortunately there's a couple of places where this has not been the case. On the lower side of the house, the foundation wall is dropped 6 inches under some basement windows, meaning the foundation wall is pretty much at grade. And in another spot, a retaining wall was built, I'm guessing for decorative landscaping reasons, that held dirt as much as a foot or more above the foundation wall, directing it against the stucco. I've removed the wall and dug it out to get exposed foundation. I think this was the natural grade. These two things are around the same corner of the house where the sump pit, pump, and radon suppression system all are. Not surprisingly, after 20 years, there's a few spots with major sheathing damage that have become comfortable entrances to the home for water, mice, and cold air. In your opinion, is water and air sealing this damaged sheathing a viable option? The structural members are treated and seem fine to me. If not, the stucco and sheathing need to come off and be replaced, right? Side note, regardless of how well sealed it is to start, this all makes me really skeptical of recent podcast advocacy of permanent wood foundations. Between settling soils, rodents, and the rest of reality, how are bulk water issues not inevitable? Thanks for running the podcast, Mickey. Well, let's tackle that one first. Is this a ding against permanent wood foundations, Mike, Brian, Andres? Mike's shaking his head.
No, I mean, this is a ding against backfilling your house, the wood portion of your house,
Right.
You've got untreated lumber and you've got stucco. I mean, it's just, and then you put dirt up against it. It's just a recipe for a problem. And I'm experiencing this on my own house here in Arizona, where the grade in the backyard is higher than the house, and the soil over the 40, 50 years that the house has been here, the has washed towards the house. There's no swale there, so now it's kind of built up to the stucco. And one of my projects this winter is digging around that back wall to make sure that this soil doesn't keep backfilling up, because it's going to cause a problem. The wood that's used for permanent wood foundations is a very specific type. It's not what you can buy at your lumber store, so it's like supercharged with the treatments. A lot more copper in it. That's or ACQ, CCA, which is going to resist the rot and decay.
Yeah, and you're going to use, with your permanent wood foundation, you're going to use a water control layer that's rated for being below grade, not what probably the building paper that is behind this stucco, and you're not putting stucco below grade, which is a reservoir material, so it takes on moisture. So stucco installations are um, need to be done, especially in anywhere that gets any significant amount of rain. Stucco installations need to be done really well and need to have, an air gap behind them and be drainable and all of that stuff. So to have stucco below grade is very different from how a permanent wood foundation is
Can I take this
detailed.
question in a little different stretch? So he's resolved the dirt against the stucco. We all know that's a problem, right? But now, does he
Hmm.
have to tear that stucco off to fix it? Or in this dry climate, is that going to be okay? Can he patch the holes as best he can from the inside and leave it alone? Or do we need to pull the stucco off and replace the sheathing on this part of the house?
I think to broaden the answer, it would be that some people might encounter a similar situation where you've got some structural damage. And in that case, if your studs or your mud sill are damaged, then you're probably going to have to execute the repair both from inside and outside. The stucco might have to come off. But in Mickey's situation, from the photos he sent, it doesn't look like, other than the sheathing being somewhat decayed, he could probably just apply some extra sheathing on the inside, and once things dry out, even though the OSB that's there as a sheathing might be a little bit compromised, and you might have mice coming in and air, but once you seal it from the inside with a cut and cobble sheathing, think of it, that it may solve the problem and not have to do an exterior uh, cutting that stucco off, because exterior stucco repairs can be tricky. To
Hmm.
not only to get your WRB tucked under the old tar paper that's back there, to get a good continuity of drainage, but also in matching the stucco finish. One thing Mickey has going for him in the photos he sent, it looks like there's a bump out right above where this backfilled stucco area is. So now that he's excavated on the outside, it looks like the bump out is about 2 feet above where the damaged area is, so or the whole stucco area. So he could use that as a nice transition point and break the stucco out up to the bottom of that bump out, and then do an exterior repair. That's a fortuitous location. If you have to pick the worst location to have of this rot potential or rot area where the backfilled soil was, to have a break point in your stucco. You can patch it in; it won't really matter if you don't match it perfectly. There's only like maybe a 6 inch or 8 inch location left and right of the bump out where you'd have to match the finish so it ties together and looks good when it's done.
I think you could even put some other different siding type there and it might look not terrible, right? Just because
That's
it
a good
is a,
suggestion too.
yeah.
Yeah.
Doesn't it make you wonder why people do this? Why? Doesn't it seem
Well,
like a bad idea to put dirt against your house? I don't know.
and take it one step further. Landscapers, they kill me. Well, they drive me nuts when I build a nice house and we leave our 6 to 8 inches of exposed foundation, which we need for water management and termite control. And then year after year, the landscapers keep putting mulch down on the mulch bed, without taking the old mulch off. And before long, 5, 6, 8 years later, they've starting to mulch up to the siding and over the siding, and they just cover it. I see this a lot in this my southern New England area, and yeah, I've gone in and had to repair that bottom course of siding and sheathing and mud sill just because of the landscapers getting overzealous with their mulch.
Well, so you get new mulch every year, but no mulch is ever taken away.
Hmm.
That's the problem I'm thinking.
Yes, exactly.
Our next question comes from Susan, and she says, "My husband is an avid listener and reader of the Fine Homebuilding magazine. We spent many an hour listening in the car on road trips. Over 2 years now, we purchased land while on our honeymoon with a house that we were told needed to come down due to its foundation issues. We live just outside of DC, and finding land is extremely difficult, so we decided to take the plunge and purchase despite the house's problems. All that being said, with the perfection of my husband's engineer style brain, he's a pilot in the Air Force, his desire to build a green home, and the wisdom he has been gaining from y'all, finding quality builders and architects has been a challenge. We worked with a local company for over a year and they just kept dropping the ball. We worked with a consultant outside our area to help us find someone online to help us create the plans and she ghosted us. I'm beyond desperate to get your advice, help, guidance, and personal assistance, if so lucky, to help my husband and our project finally start to take flight. That's pretty good. We know exactly what we want, but we have had a hard time getting it accomplished. With a deployment on the horizon, I'm hoping for some good news to give my husband and our little family. What do you do when you cannot find someone to make your architect plans for you? Someone who has a background in green homes, as well as making something that looks old. My husband John has poured so many hours into this project and has pages of notes, and here we are with nothing. We've been disappointed in people saying that they understand the vision, but then cannot deliver. Thank you for your time and consideration of my question on how to find someone to help us with this project worthy of your recommendation. Also, if any of you could personally talk with him or more, I would be forever grateful. Sincerely, wife trying to make it happen, Susan. Susan, I'm going to go first because I have a very brief answer. And I'm going to say call Mike Maines. Do you guys have thoughts on this?
Well, I think your thought there is to plug yourself into a community. I mean, not that Mike is a community unto himself, but he's plugged in to several green building, high performance homes, thoughtful building and design networks. And I think either locally or nationally, there are lots of those networks out there. One of them being Green Building Advisor. Just go on Green Building Advisor if you haven't already done so, and just start a question like, "Hey, I'm looking for some designer, consultant, green building aficionados in my area of the greater DC area." I don't know if the Northeast Sustainable or NESI, I don't even know what it stands for, Northeast Sustainable Energy Association. I don't know if they reach down to DC area, but I know they're from like New Jersey north through New England. But they're a good group. If you also the Passive House US groups, US Green Building Council, all of those usually often have local subgroups. And if you can find a local BS and beer group, so to speak, that's in your area, and just start talking to builders, architects, designers, and just interested green building people like yourself that you might, once you're plugged into that network, find someone who will click with you and won't ghost you.
Mm-hmm. And it may just it may just have to be, and I've seen this in many situations over the years, but it may just have to be that it's more than one professional working on the project. If you can't, if you can, if you find someone, for example, sounds like they want a sort of a new old house kind of thing where the house has older style and but modern efficiency and building science and all that stuff, and you may need to find an architect who can do sort of cursory schematic drawings and elevations to dial in the style, and then find a consultant to help with performance stuff, and and then I guess the critical piece of the puzzle, if you were to go that route, or even if you were to find an architect that if they were to find an architect that kind of had it all, could get them the style they want and the building assemblies they want and mechanicals and all that kind of stuff in a set of plans, you still need a builder that can execute it. And to take it kind of back to where we started, that's not going to cut corners. So that's just another piece of the puzzle, is making sure that what is on the plans when you get there gets executed in the real world.
I
So
think
you've
a
got to find
build firm is going to be more better suited to this type of model where these folks know what they want. They have a high performance mindset, And the great thing about the design build model is you're not going to have a designer build something you can't afford. They're going to know what the real costs are to building a project, and you're not going to have to value engineer. And I think that's the cutting corners largely that, even even if it's well intentioned, can have bad consequences for energy performance and durability. And yeah, I also
Agreed.
thought of there's a number of high performance panelizing companies in the country now, regionally set up, and they seem to take a more modern building aesthetic as a baseline. But I think they can build anything. But if you're looking online and browsing, you're not going to find what looks like an old house is their first house in the catalog, is my guess. What do y'all think? We hear this often. Yeah. What is there an easier solution?
No, it's
No.
unfortunate, but there's no easy answer, and it's just a matter of hunting until you find the right people that you can work with, whether it's a design build group, or in the case of, like Brian was saying, if you get a designer, then you're going to also have to then find a builder who's going to execute according to plans. You can also find a builder who's plugged into green building or environmentally sustainable building. And then that builder will often know designers if you need to have to put together a team. So really, it's going to be a matter of a team approach. You got to find a builder and designer, whether it's all in one house or whether it's two separate entities, but they have to be able to work together. So could be a bit of hunting. Let us know how you make out. I'll be interested to hear if you can find someone, and how you find them, how you find
Yeah.
the, the people you work with, because it would be helpful for us to relay that to other listeners.
Agreed. This comes from Cody. Hey, podcast. I currently live in a permanent wood foundation home. When the foundation was inspected by the inspector, he dug down a bit and checked for polyethylene against the exterior plywood sheathing. That's it. Is there more to look for? I had also opened up an interior wall, which he took no interest in. I was expecting the use of a moisture meter or something. I was also expecting crushed stone to be just below the topsoil. The idea being stone is able to move water away from the house. The inspector said the crushed stone is below the footing, which is a wood footing, and maybe near the bottom of the sheathing. My main question is, can I dig around the building to inspect the polyethylene and apply a modern product and then exterior insulation? I was thinking rock wool against the dirt. My understanding is that the backfill is helping support the building. Can I dig out one side, or will the backfill on the other side push the house over? Will I need to do it section by section? All right, this is an interesting thought exercise. So if you dig up the permanent wood foundation or any foundation, is the soil pressure from the other side going to push it over? And I'd never thought about this.
Generally, no is the short answer, but the longer answer would be it depends, because if you had, say, 100-foot long permanent wood foundation wall that was backfilled, um, then it may not have any interior lateral bracing, which could be a problem. But generally speaking, if you've got a moderately sized house, the diaphragm of the floor sheathing and floor joist connected to the foundation wall, whether it's a permanent wood foundation or a concrete or a block foundation, will be enough to resist, or I should say transfer, the soil pressure that's unbalanced from one side to the other across the whole diaphragm, so that you don't collapse the house. So yeah, don't worry about that.
What about further waterproofing? I guess my question is, like, is there a problem? And if not, why not
Right.
just leave it the heck alone? But if water's getting in, I guess you'd want to solve this, right?
Yep.
Well, I
Yeah,
had
if
the
it ain't
same
broke, don't
question.
fix it.
Yeah, I had the same question. Was it, is he just nervous because he has a permanent wood foundation, and some people are skeptical of him, or does he have a problem? Because for polyethylene sheeting was the material of choice for permanent wood foundations for a long time, and a lot of them are doing just fine the way they are. So I don't know. Maybe it's the adding insulation is the impetus for the project if he really wants to do that, and maybe he can't do it from the inside. We don't know. But as Mike said, it's probably not a problem to dig it up. So if you want to do it,
And
I would
if
think of
go at
better
it.
ways to spend my time. I'm just saying. But I don't have water pouring in my basement. So if you do,
Right.
that's a whole different thing. What do you think,
Yes.
Andres? You do have water pouring in your basement. Are you tempted to like dig up the entire foundation to fix
This
it?
is not affecting any part of the foundation. This is actually a step up, concrete step up addition that was made into the house. And there's a small gap
Okay.
as you step into the house. So I'm thinking it's either there that I have to seal around it, or it's up top where I install the floodlight. So it's a little bit different.
Digging.
But to Mike's point, having mulch just put there every time, it's quite, it's gonna get built up. So one of the solutions I would say is just put gravel with some plants and just leave it alone. You don't have to do any maintenance.
Carol's had some success, and I know you have, Mike, also with we call them ground gutters, and that's in your world a piece of EPDM roof membrane just below the soil meant to direct runoff away from the foundation. Can you talk about that? That might be a good middle ground for Cody.
Yeah, it would be a good middle ground in that you'd relieve the amount of moisture that is close to the foundation by redirecting it away. And it's just you could use EPDM, you could use some flexible PVC sheet. You could use I actually save old pool liners from friends who have their pools relined, and I cut that into sheets and just attach it to the foundation with a strip of pressure treated lumber and just screw into the foundation, and then dig down 6, 8, 10 inches down into your surrounding soil and slope that subgrade away, and then put the liner down, and then I put crushed stone or river rock over the top of that, just so that it helps to move the water away from the wall and keep plants away from that area as well. So you're not watering close to the house. 3, 4, 5 feet away from the house is plenty to do an underground gutter.
Well, Cody, I hope you'll tell us what you do, and if you do have problems with your foundation, I hope you'll reply back via email what's going on, because that might help us craft a better answer, a more complete answer. We got one more question here, guys. Let's try and get to it. This comes from Dan. Hey, podcast, how are you? During a recent discussion on roofing, there was a lot of talk about warranties. As an architect, I often tell clients that a warranty is a good measure of a product's quality, but I'd like to hear your opinion on this. Do y'all think that's true? Do y'all think it's worth spending more money on products that have a longer warranty? And finally, how do you talk to clients or other contractors about the value of warranties? I'm looking forward to your thoughts, and I want to thank you for all you do. Take care, Dan. Mike, you go first. I've heard you talk about warranties on a number of products.
I don't. I don't really rely on warranties and warranty claims, because when you generally read the fine print, and in my experience, particularly with roofing, when I've had a product warranty claim, the amount that we get from the company is usually insubstantial. um, so the quality of the shingle is going to be based on usually the weight of the shingle. So the heavier the shingle, the more substantially it's built, the performance is they're going to last longer, essentially, is what's going to come down to. So I base my roofing buying decisions on the weight of the shingle and the other performance characteristics, like the algae resistance that's built into them and that kind of warranty. But I don't place any faith. And as far as discussing with clients, I say ABC grades. This one we know is going to last longer than this one, and I tell them that in the future, if there is a problem, which for roof shingles anyway, we really haven't seen uh, manufacturing or physical problems with many shingles since the mid 1990s. So they pretty much worked all the bugs out with the fiberglass mat and the SBS modified asphalt that they're using to embed in the fiberglass mat. So they worked out the bugs back in the 90s. Most all the shingles are good today. All the manufacturers, or the main manufacturers, make good shingles that are fairly comparable. So I just kind of not even discuss it with homeowners when it comes to shingle warranties.
Uh, Gentlemen, thoughts?
Well, one, you know, The short answer is that I don't know. I mean, I've always heard that language about like, whether or not you would ever have a warranty claim or be able to execute one. That if that the warranty lengths tend to go along, right side by side with the quality of the shingle, and maybe that's true. Maybe as manufacturer shingles get more robust, um, the warranties get better too. One sort of adjacency to the discussion that is interesting is that for roofing, some roofing materials and some other building materials, one of the things that goes hand in hand with the warranty is the installation details. And so, for example, you can get, the lifetime warranty on a GAF shingle would require an installation that has a properly installed underlayment, properly installed drip edges, all of these things. And so that gives some assurance to the homeowner or someone speccing a product that if those installation details are followed, again, whether or not you'd ever have or execute a warranty claim, you've got a roof that's properly installed. So that's a helpful thing too, I think. Of course, it just like we mentioned to someone else earlier a couple questions ago, like the work still has to be done well, but the details are there and provided by the manufacturer. And from what I've seen on a few different roof specs that I've looked at, those details are good.
I'm going to conclude by saying that I think that warranties are often more based on marketing than an assurance of quality products, because folks buy things that they feel more confident in purchasing. And a warranty is some measure that what you're buying is covered by the manufacturer as being durable to a certain period of time. And a brief anecdote. One of our former colleagues, his dad was an engineer in the automotive business, and automotive manufacturers make calculated risks on the warranties of their vehicles. And the truck I know had failures with the rear end. And so their solution was to put in a more expensive gear oil. But when the cycle of the truck was lapsing or coming to an end, when they were going to replace the model, they started putting the cheap gear oil in, even though it only saved a few dollars. But their metric was that they're not going to have enough warranty claims by people who tow heavy trailers, which is where the failures occurred, to warrant the expense of the heavier weight gear oil. So I don't put a lot of faith in manufacturer warranties, because I think it's a calculated metric and meant to sell things, not ensure their durability. So that's my jaded take on it all. And the building products industry is littered with failures of siding and other building products that had great warranties that just didn't last. And so I would say...
I've been victim of a few of those, yeah.
Yeah. I think your own experience and positive experience is a way better measure of something's durability than what the manufacturer tells you it's going to last on a piece of paper. But what does last are timeless architectural details and things you see in old houses that help them perform better and last longer, and we're going to talk about that in the after show, and I hope you all stay tuned. If you are a Fine Homebuilding All Access member, thank you very much for your support. If you're not, I hope you'll consider it. It's a great way to get the Fine Homebuilding archive and all the wonderful stuff we've done over 40-some years in the effort to improve home building and home remodeling. So thank you, Access members. Stay tuned for the after show. It's been a pleasure talking to you guys. Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It was fun.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks to Mike, Brian, and Andres for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Keep craft alive. Thanks very much for listening.